Thank you, Minister. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Please be seated. I adopt the salutations previously given, but want to begin by referring to Brensel, who welcomed us to the Garden Hills constituency. I asked Shivago Lang, my religious advisor in residence, to find for me the passage in the Bible talking about storing up treasures on earth, which he did. And it says, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal." And the Boundaries Commission has recommended that this treasure that Wenzel thought he was storing up on this earth is no longer in his constituency. His constituency is on the other side of the road. But ladies and gentlemen, this development is taking place surrounded by 3 other subdivisions: the Horst Davis subdivision, the Assembly's Estate subdivision, and the Ophelia Store subdivision. They were all Crown land, all land granted by the government to somebody, and that some developer developed it. It just so happened that one of the persons who was very loud in the newspapers about the government developing this site and making land available to Bahamians for this site is also the principal owner of all of these developments that took place on Crown land that eventually went to a private person. And this one here happened to be a government subdivision, not a private subdivision like the other 3. All of this got Crown grants from the government. In fact, the reality is that it is very difficult in a society like the Bahamas to get the truth out oftentimes. It's very difficult because we have one story and we just take that and we carry it over and over again. I was pleasantly comforted by the ease with which I can drive here this morning from downtown, and the fact that we'll be able to do that all over this island not long from now, because the reality is there is no other means by which you can ensure that school children are able to walk on sidewalks and old people are not having to walk in the street unless you build sidewalks. You cannot get good quality potable water to people unless you dig up the streets and the side of the road and put the pipes down. You cannot put in electrification in densely populated areas over the hill that don't have overhead cable unless you do the work. The reality is there must be some pain in order for there to be some gain. And for those who are faint of heart, they turn back whenever they have this kind of opposition from large numbers of people who are going to benefit from what you are doing. But those of us who are committed and devoted to providing for you the best we can, carry on and do the best we can, notwithstanding the opposition from those who are going to be the principal beneficiaries of the good that we do every day. Today we meet here at Mackey Yard to develop this publicly owned land into a housing subdivision. And I might say, for the benefit of getting all the facts on the table, the land is still owned by the government. It has not been transferred to housing yet. I will sign the Crown grant to them as soon as I am satisfied they do what they're supposed to do with respect to this land and other lands also. Housing is a critically unmet and overwhelmingly urgent need for many Bahamians for affordable and safe housing. And the lots that are going to be developed here are going to be sold to Bahamians. Period. Sold to Bahamians. Some will recall that back in 2007, when we first came to office, we promised a very simple thing. We said that we would develop, during our term in office, 60 affordable homes, 600 affordable homes, facilitated by providing either fully serviced lots or lots with housing thereon. And the Ministry of Housing wants me to tell you this morning that they have not only done that, they have exceeded that goal. They have constructed, and Tommy Turnquest, you are always interested in this question, asking of Ken, so he wants me to answer you this morning. They have not only met the goal, they have exceeded it. They've already constructed 470 houses and sold 237 service lots, and they now have under construction 180 houses in New Providence, in Grand Bahama, and in Abaco, and there remains more to be done, yet more to be done to assist Bahamians to own their own homes. But we've made an impressive start since 2007. You know, all that glitters is not gold, and I'm glad to see the chairman of the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation here this morning. All that glitters is not gold. And when the facts are known, as they will be in short order, as to how houses have been constructed in the recent past, and the source of the funding for those houses, and the risk which has been taken, and the cost to the taxpayers of the Bahamas as a result of that, and the fact that the Mortgage Corporation has not kept faith with its sinking fund, etc., etc., people will begin to see the difference between reality and a mirage. But since 2007, we have 84 houses that have been constructed in the Industrial Garden area, and it's 2 extensions, and 47 houses in Dignity Gardens, 114 in Pride Estates, and Tommy and Ken, so you can look out your window and see the 114, and 13 in the other gardens. In Abaco, they have done 113 houses in Spring City, and Grand Bahama 58, in Bellington Pinder Subdivision, 28 in Sunset, and 12 in Heritage and Frobisher Circle. This groundbreaking this morning represents a part of the government's housing initiative. The government is challenged with funding for housing because, as I said, what took place at an earlier time. What I might also say while I'm here this morning in particular is that the Mortgage Corporation ought to insist upon the Minister of Housing having resort to the Mortgage Guarantee Fund for all of the delinquent mortgages which has been guaranteed by the Minister of Housing. That the reluctance or reticence in pursuing that is totally unacceptable, and that the Mortgage Guarantee Fund does have significant monies in it to be able to repay monies for people who have defaulted. The default rate for housing is very high at the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation, and I would therefore expect that greater efforts will be made by the Mortgage Corporation and housing to ensure that persons who are given mortgages are able to satisfy the basic requirement, because there's no point of giving somebody something that they cannot afford to pay back. And the mortgage delinquency rate is unacceptably high and unaffordable and unsustainable for the future. This land is going to be developed, it's just under 8 acres of land, is going to be developed into 53 lots, and the development cost is going to be of the order of $3.9 million, I'm told. That includes the houses and the infrastructure. And the land was first leased by the government to a Mr. Mackey, and in recent years it was occupied by hundreds of persons and became known as Mackey Yard. And then there was a fire. Thankfully, no lives were lost. In fact, the fellows tease Ken all the time that they hope he is not a suspect. Irrespective of that. But I especially want to thank Minister Dion folks and the Department of Social Services. the members of the clergy and other concerned private sector organizations and individuals who were first responders following the fire. Their generosity and their time and resources brought much needed relief to the victims of the fire and sped up their resettlement. And I want to thank the Ministry of Public Works, Mr. Nico Grant, and the Department of Lands and the officials at Public Works and Transport, and the Department of Lands and Survey, private surveyors and contractors, for surveying, clearing and securing the site following the fire. You will see from the photographs displayed here that the task in developing this site has not been easy. Like Mackay Yard, other parcels of government-owned land in this area have been occupied by Bahamians and non-Bahamians. We are systematically moving to reclaim these publicly owned lands. And it would be a wonderful idea, Mr. Russell, if you can get the press to just go with you around here and show them some of the beautiful houses constructed by Bahamians, occupied by Bahamians on government land, squatting just like the Haitians did on this site. And so we're going to seek systematically to reclaim these publicly owned lands, and as the Minister said, we will also take account of what development has taken place on the land. The reality, though, that in some instances, Mackay Yard and other places being some exceptions, the governments of the Bahamas have not been as responsive as circumstances require for people to access and receive title to publicly owned land. What we mustn't forget is that all land in the Bahamas at some point in time belonged to the government. All land was at some point in time crown land, no matter where you live or what business you are in. At some point in time, that was crown land, just like this here is crown land. We've had to undertake massive exercises here in New Providence, especially in the Carmichael Road area, in Abaco, in Andros, and North Eleuthera, and in other parts of the Bahamas, like Grand Bahama, to make title available to families, some of whom have been an unauthorized occupation of government-owned land and developed commercial enterprises on the land. Others constructed houses on the land, and in some cases, families have been residing and continue to reside on government-owned land without proper authorization for generations. The regularization exercise is ongoing and continuous. Already more than 3,000 Bahamians would have received title to property upon which they have lived and worked around the country by this government. Indeed, I would hazard a guess that the term settlement, when we talk about the Family Islands, we talk about this settlement, that settlement. I would hazard a guess that the term settlement used to describe communities in the Family Islands derives from the practice of settling on parcels of land, constructing homes, engaging in subsistence farming, and creating small businesses on what was government-owned land in the first place. And as occupation stretched into generations, and no one could produce good legal title to the property, we began to call it generation land. And that's what it is, generation land. We've been here for generations. We just ain't got no legal title to the land. Like places like the place I grew up in, Cooperstown, Abaco, or like the Bogue and Eleuthera, or other parts of the Bahamas. In some instances, the government leased lands, large parcels of land, to companies which were subsequently struck off the register of companies for not paying their fees. And as the company's business went out of business, Bahamians went into occupation of some of these lands, and the land title vested in the government. And places like in Green Turtle Key, Abaco, in my constituency, there is a large tract of land being developed that they call the company land. Long before my time, that it would lease land in Cowpen Road for Bahamians to go into the business of farming only. They were agricultural leases, agricultural land. some of the people, many of the people, well, in fact, you drive along Cowpen Road and you can make your own judgment. You see, instead of the land being used for farming, all kind of businesses, apartments and houses constructed on it. It's now almost like a city. And they've got services from BTC and BTC, and it is not clear how those utility corporations extended services, but that's what happened. In fact, this area here had electricity from BEC. But now, if you or I try to get BEC or the Water and Sewage Corporation to supply us with a supply to our homes, they will ask you for your land paper. But this area had electricity and street lights. And you'd also note they also have paved roads. Now the government accepts the legitimacy and acknowledges the legitimacy of the concerns of neighbouring homeowners in places like Mackay Yard, and the legitimacy of the complaints of persons here in areas like the Ross Davis subdivision, that they had expected to live in clean, well-ordered communities. As importantly, the properties in which they have invested hard-earned dollars will be protected from squalid communities. Never mind, when the communities came, they met Mackay Yard here. When they built, they met Mackay Yard here. But once they came and found it here, they blamed the government for having Mackay Yard here. That's the reality. We carry lots of blame for lots of things. We've identified here in Nassau a number of squatter communities, all of which with attendant social problems, and they are addressing them systematically. And that's why I think it would be a wonderful idea if the press would consent to just driving around and seeing what exists in this same part of town and several other places in Nassau that's on government land, and see the Bahamians who have built houses on it, together with the illegal immigrants who have built houses on it, so we don't all blame illegal immigrants for it. You know, in fact, in this land here, a noted Bahamian was facilitating the collection of rent from the Haitians who lived in this village. Even though he didn't own it, had no right to get it, was collecting rent from the poor Haitians who lived on the same land. Now, just as these squatter settlements didn't come about overnight, we are going to take some time to eliminate them. But we can get the job done of reclaiming public land, and their circumstances require regularizing the occupation and granting title to those who are so entitled, Bahamians. Today is Mackay Yard. Earlier it was Pride Estates 3. It will soon be the rest of Fire Trail Road, Sugarman Estate in Fox Hill, Dignity Gardens on Carmichael Road, and thereafter will continue into other places. I want to encourage the 25 contractors who have been engaged, 22 or 25, to build houses on the site to produce quality work. I'm told by the Minister of Housing that if he could find the money, I have my doubts about finding the money, that he's going to have about 80 contractors engaged in building houses between now and January. He said he got that now. Well, I just hope he has the money to pay that. The one going to make sure that no contracts are signed unless we know where the money is coming from. We know that the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation is not now in a position to fund such a program. But I also want to say that I'm very pleased with the progress made in improving the quality of houses being constructed by housing. But I'm also deeply pained by the many complaints I continue to get from citizens who purchase a house, obtain mortgages for government houses, and that the houses have been shoddily built. I'm looking in the face of one right now who's catching hell on a place that the government built Never mind housing, want to say it was built before their time. It is one housing. It is a continuous housing thing. She'll be delighted when you finish. And so while this situation has been less in recent time, instances of poor construction still persist. We expect, therefore, that the houses being built here will be built to good standards. One of the good things about this site is that it is not one of the sites that you have to pour all sorts of quarry into. It's not a low-lying area, and so we shouldn't have the flooding problem. The Ministry of Housing is therefore charged to ensure that they are built to code and to good quality. Citizens and the government ought not continue to have to expend hard-earned dollars to repair inferior quality workmanship, as has been the case in far too many instances. And I encourage those persons who are going to be selected to purchase the houses now being built to take pride in their homes, to maintain them, and to ensure that the site never again returns to the blight which typified it before the terrible fire destroyed it. I'm also told that the plans to relocate a number of residents to accommodate the new proposed roadways down here have not endeared the Ministry of Housing to many former residents. I want to say, though, that this is necessary if we are going to have a well-planned and supported new subdivision. And so I ask for the patience and cooperation of affected persons. The Ministry of Housing will proceed with regularization of approximately 64 squatter families, Bahamian families, 64 in Fire Trail 1 and 2. This is Fire Trail Road here, in Pride Estates 3. And thereafter, they'll proceed to construct another 110 houses up in Pride. A similar exercise has taken place down at Dignity 2. The employment generated by these housing construction are in and of themselves important development for the economy of the Bahamas and for local businesses here in Nassau and elsewhere. I want especially to congratulate Minister Ken Russell for this accomplishment. This has not been an easy task, most especially so over the same Mackey-Yard subdivision. He's had to endure all manner of things. People ascribe to you sometimes base motives that can only come because that's what they would have done if they were in office. When they say, well, you will do this thing, it can only be because that's the kind of people they are. That you are going to take this and give this to illegal immigrants when thousands of Bahamians are not able to get a house. You know, the people who we give houses, we give lots to, who've been squatting on government land for generations, were given lots 100 by 100 for 2 cents a square foot by the government. $200. We've recently raised the price to 5 cents a square foot, which would be $500. Land is wealth. Governments have little means by which they can increase the wealth of people. If they are able to put land in their hand, land becomes bankable, land becomes something that they can pass on from generation to generation, land they can sell, and land whose value continues to appreciate. And so we are delighted to have been able to empower more than 3,000 Bahamians by giving them a plot of land for themselves. One of the first things that my successors in office did when they came to office was to increase the price of land for Bahamians who built houses on the land by many, 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 many folds. Yours has not been an easy task, Ken, but I thank you for staying the course. And I thank the Ministry and the Department of Housing, and very importantly, the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation, with the caveats I mentioned of the science, of which you are well aware. And I thank you for the progress which you are making at BMC in bringing some order to a very disordered place. Thank you very much. I thank all of you for your efforts in advancing the government's mandate to provide housing to increased numbers of Bahamians. We look forward to the completion of your work. One of the things that is very clear now is that the government will have to return to where we were in the 80s when I was Minister of Housing, that is, not rely upon the government agency exclusively to provide funding for housing. And so we would expect that the lending institutions like Finco, Finco, Commonwealth Bank and the others will chip in and provide mortgage loans for persons who qualify for housing. Thank you very much. Good morning.